Called too dangerous. But when the Scourge came, aliens begged. Part 5. What monsters choose to Beatty. Fleet gathered at the edge of known space. 300 ships from every species that still had vessels to spare hung information against the absolute blackness that lay beyond. Ahead of them was dark space, the void between galaxies where no star had ever burned and no living thing had ever traveled. Until now. Captain Daniel Shaw stood on the bridge of the Resolute and looked at the emptiness before them. Somewhere in that void was the source of the swarm, the central mass, the ancient creature that had slept for 10,000 years and had now awakened to feed. All ships report ready. Admiral Kevin Park said over the fleet communication channel. Human vessels will lead the assault. Council ships will provide support and cover our retreat if necessary. Daniel smiled grimly. There would be no retreat. Everyone knew that. This was a one-way mission. They would either destroy the central mass or die trying. There was no middle ground. Take us in, Daniel ordered. The fleet moved forward into the darkness. The journey took 7 days. 7 days of traveling through absolute nothing, guided only by the faint signals that Dr. Nathan Cole had traced back to their source. 7 days of waiting, preparing, and wondering if they would ever see the stars again. On the 7th day, they found it. The central mass was larger than any planet Daniel had ever seen. It hung in the void like a tumor, a living thing made of black flesh and hungry mouths. Swarm creatures poured from its surface in endless waves, billions of them spreading out to protect their source. All ships, weapons free, Daniel said. Make every shot count. The battle began. Human ships dove into the swarm, their weapons blazing with fire and radiation and the chemical compounds that hurt the creatures more than anything else. Council ships hung back and provided covering fire, their energy weapons less effective, but still useful for clearing paths. General Catherine Walsh led the ground assault. 50 transports carrying 2,000 soldiers punched through the swarm's defenses and landed on the surface of the central mass. The flesh beneath their boots was warm and pulsing, alive in ways that no one wanted to think about too carefully. Plant the charges, Catherine ordered. We have 4 hours to reach the core and set the fusion bombs. Move out. Her soldiers spread across the nightmare landscape. They fought through tunnels of living tissue, through chambers filled with half-formed swarm creatures, through the beating heart of something older than their entire species. They died by the dozens, but they kept moving forward. In space, Daniel watched his fleet being torn apart. The swarm was endless here, pouring from the central mass faster than they could destroy them. Ships exploded. Crews died. The beautiful formation they had started with was now a chaotic mess of burning wreckage and desperate survivors. We are losing too many ships, Kevin Park reported. If we do not pull back soon, we will not have enough vessels to escape. Daniel shook his head. We are not leaving until the charges are set. Hold the line. Commander Maria Santos led her squadron in one final attack run. Her ship was damaged, leaking atmosphere from a dozen breaches. Half her crew was dead, but she could see the weak point in the swarm's formation, the place where the creatures were thin enough to punch through. All remaining ships follow me, she said. We are going to clear a path for the transports. Her squadron dove into the gap, firing everything they had left. Swarm creatures exploded around them. Maria felt her ship shudder as something tore through the hull. Alarms screamed warnings that she ignored. The path was clear. Ground teams, you have your window, she called. Make it count. Then her ship was gone, consumed by the swarm. But her sacrifice had given the ground forces the time they needed. Deep inside the central mass, Sergeant Tyler Brooks reached the core. It was a chamber of pulsing light and writhing tentacles, the brain of the creature that had destroyed countless civilizations. He stared at it for a moment, then began placing the fusion charges. Brooks to Walsh, he reported. "Charges are set. Timer is running. We have 90 minutes to get out." Catherine's voice came back, tight with pain. "Understood. All teams, fall back to the transports. Move." The retreat was brutal. Soldiers fought their way back through tunnels that were now collapsing around them as the central mass sensed the threat. Swarm creatures poured in from every direction, trying to stop them from escaping. Tyler never made it to the transport. A wave of creatures cut him off from his squad. He stood in a corridor of living flesh, surrounded by nightmares, and knew that he was going to die here. He thought about his family back on Earth, his mother, who had told him to be careful, his sister, who had said she was proud of him. He would never see them again, but the charges were set. The mission was complete. His death would mean something. For the fallen, he whispered, and opened fire. The transports launched with less than half the soldiers who had landed. They punched through the swarm's defenses and raced back toward the surviving fleet. Behind them, the timer counted down. Daniel watched the countdown on his screen. 60 seconds. 50. 40. "All ships, maximum thrust," he ordered. "Get as far away as possible." The fleet ran. The swarm chased them. And then the timer reached 0. The fusion charges detonated in the core of the central mass. The explosion was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. A ball of fire larger than a sun erupted in dark space, consuming the ancient creature and billions of its children in an instant. The shockwave hit the fleet seconds later. Ships tumbled and spun. Smaller vessels broke apart. But the larger ships survived, riding the wave of destruction away from the dying creature. When the light finally faded, Daniel looked at his sensors. The central mass was gone. The swarm creatures that remained were scattered and confused, their connection to the hive mind severed forever. Without the central intelligence to guide them, they would die within days. The war was over. 3 months later, Daniel Shaw stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council. The chamber was filled with representatives from every surviving species, and they were all looking at him. Counselor Dexarn stepped forward. His compound eyes were bright with emotion as he spoke. "On behalf of the Galactic Council, I present humanity with full membership and permanent voting rights. From this day forward, you are not our prisoners. You are our equals. You are our saviors." The chamber erupted in applause. Species that had feared humanity for decades now cheered for them. Daniel stood in the center of it all and felt nothing but tired. Later, Lisa Monroe found him on the observation deck, looking at the stars. "You should be celebrating," she said. "You just saved the galaxy." Daniel shook his head. "We lost 60,000 people. Half our fleet. Some of the bravest soldiers who ever lived. This does not feel like a victory." Lisa stood beside him. "What does it feel like?" Daniel thought for a long moment. "It feels like we finally proved something. Not to them, to ourselves. For 40 years, we wondered if they were right. If we really were just monsters who did not deserve to exist among civilized beings. Now we know the truth. And what is that?" Daniel turned to face her. His eyes were heavy with grief, but shining with something else. Pride, perhaps. Or hope. "We are exactly what they said we were. Dangerous, violent, unpredictable, willing to do whatever it takes to survive. But we are also something they never expected. We are protectors. We fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. We die for strangers. We forgive those who hurt us, and then we save their lives anyway." He looked back at the stars. "That is what it means to be human. We are monsters who choose to be heroes. And now the galaxy knows it too." The darkness of space stretched before them, vast and full of unknowns. But Daniel Shaw was not afraid. Whatever came next, humanity would face it the way they always had. together stubborn and utterly unwilling to surrender. The galaxy had called them too dangerous. They had been right, and that had made all the difference. Called too dangerous, but when the Scourge came, aliens begged. Part 4. The nature of predators. The battle for the Thurny system lasted 3 days. It was the first real test of human tactics against the swarm, and the galaxy watched in stunned silence. Captain Daniel Shaw stood on the bridge of the Resolute, coordinating the combined forces. Around him, screens showed the chaos of battle. Human ships weaved through clouds of swarm creatures, firing weapons that the Council had never seen before. "Rotate weapon systems," Daniel ordered. Group Alpha switches to incendiary rounds. Group Beta moves to plasma dispersal. Group Gamma prepare the radiation bombs. His officers relayed the commands. Across the fleet, human ships changed their attacks in perfect synchronization. The swarm adapted to incendiary weapons within minutes, but by then the humans had already switched to something else. Plasma became useless, so they switched to kinetic projectiles. When the swarm hardened against those, the radiation bombs tore through them. The key was never letting the swarm stabilize, never giving them time to adapt completely. Always changing, always evolving, always one step ahead. On the ground, Sergeant Tyler Brooks led his squad through the ruins of a Thurny city. The swarm had already consumed most of the population, but survivors were trapped in bunkers beneath the surface. His mission was to get them out. Contact left. One of his soldiers called out. Swarm forms moving through the buildings. Tyler raised his weapon. It was not a standard energy rifle like the Council species used. It was a chemical thrower, loaded with compounds that human scientists had developed specifically for this war. "Fire at will," he ordered. The squad opened up. Streams of burning chemicals splashed across the swarm creatures, eating through their adaptive shells. The creatures screamed, a sound that no one had heard before. The swarm did not feel pain. It was not supposed to feel anything. But these weapons hurt them in ways they could not adapt to. Dr. Nathan Cole had discovered the secret. Human biochemistry contained compounds that were toxic to the swarm on a fundamental level. Something in human DNA, some ancient genetic quirk from millions of years of evolution on Earth, produced substances that the swarm could not process. Human sweat, human blood, even human breath contained traces of these compounds. The weapons Tyler's squad carried were concentrated versions of these substances. The swarm could adapt to energy. It could adapt to kinetic force. It could adapt to radiation. But it could not adapt to being poisoned by the very essence of humanity. "Push forward," Tyler shouted. "Get to those bunkers." His squad moved through the city like wolves hunting prey. They did not march in formation like Council soldiers. They spread out, used cover, communicated with hand signals and short bursts of radio. They fought like predators, not like armies. Above the planet, Commander Maria Santos led her squadron in a series of hit-and-run attacks. She had developed what she called wolfpack tactics, using small groups of ships to strike at the swarm's weak points and then disappear before they could respond. "Target their largest forms," she ordered. "Those are the command nodes. Take them out and the smaller creatures lose coordination." The squadron dove into the swarm, firing everything they had at the massive shapes that served as the hive mind's local controllers. The explosion sent ripples of confusion through the swarm. Creatures that had been moving with perfect coordination suddenly stumbled and collided with each other. "Pull back," Maria called. "Let them reorganize. Then we hit them again from a different angle." It was exhausting work. The swarm was endless, and every victory was temporary. But slowly, painfully, the humans were pushing them back. Counselor Dexon watched the battle from the command ship, unable to believe what he was seeing. He had spent decades studying human violence, cataloging their wars and atrocities. He had written reports explaining why they were too dangerous to exist among civilized species, but he had never seen humans fight like this. They were not just aggressive. They were creative, adaptable, relentless. Every time the swarm countered one of their tactics, they invented a new one. Every time a plan failed, they improvised something better. They fought without fear, without hesitation, without the careful calculations the council species always made before committing to battle. "They are insane," a Therany officer muttered. "They do not care if they die." Dexarn shook his head slowly. "No, they care very much if they die. They simply care more about winning than about surviving. That is what makes them so effective." He watched a human ship ram directly into a swarm cluster, detonating its reactor core and taking thousands of creatures with it. The pilot had sent a final message before impact. 3 words that Dexarn did not understand for the fallen. "What does that mean?" He asked a human translator nearby. The translator, a young woman named Sandra Hill, smiled sadly. "It means they are fighting for everyone who has already died. The Kellori, the Therany colonists, the crews of the Council fleet. Humans do not just fight for the living. They fight for the dead too. They fight to make sure the sacrifice meant something." Dexarn was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke quietly. "We call them monsters because they fight so well. But monsters do not sacrifice themselves for strangers. Monsters do not die for people who hated them. What are they, if not monsters?" Sandra looked at the battle raging outside. "They are human. That is all they have ever been. You just never gave them a chance to show you what that really means." The battle ended on the 4th day. The swarm was driven from the Therany system, leaving behind billions of dead creatures and a planet that could finally begin to heal. Human losses were heavy. 30 ships destroyed. 2,000 soldiers killed on the ground. But they had won. Daniel Shaw stood on the bridge and received the reports. Every victory came with a cost. Every advance was paid for in blood. But they were winning. Slowly, painfully, they were winning. "Captain," his communications officer said. "Message from Dr. Cole. He says he has found something important. He needs to speak with you immediately." Daniel nodded and opened the channel. Nathan's face appeared on screen, and his expression was serious. "We captured some swarm samples during the battle," Nathan said. "I have been analyzing them. The swarm is not random. It is not just a mindless hunger. There is an intelligence behind it, a central consciousness that controls everything. Where?" Daniel asked. "Dark space, beyond the edge of the galaxy. There is something out there, Captain. Something that has been sleeping for 10,000 years. Something that woke up hungry." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. "Can we reach it?" "I think so. But it will be the most dangerous mission anyone has ever attempted. We would be going into the heart of the swarm, into the nest of the creature that birthed them all." Daniel looked at the stars outside his window. Somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, something ancient and terrible was waiting. Something that had destroyed civilizations before humans ever existed. Something that would destroy everything if it was not stopped. "Start planning," he said. "We are going to finish this war where it started." The final battle was coming. Called too dangerous, but when the Scourge came, aliens begged. Part 3. The desperate request. The council chamber had never been so quiet. Representatives from 100 worlds sat in their seats and watched as 5 humans walked through the great doors. They moved with confidence, their boots echoing on the polished floor. They did not bow. They did not show deference. They walked like conquerors entering a defeated city. Captain Daniel Shaw led the group. Behind him came Admiral Kevin Park, General Catherine Walsh, Ambassador Lisa Monroe, and Dr. Nathan Cole, They stopped in the center of the chamber and faced the council. Councilor Dexon rose from his seat. His forearms trembled slightly as he spoke. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I thank you for answering our request. We understand that this is difficult, given the history between our peoples. Daniel looked at the alien for a long moment. Difficult, he repeated. You confined our species to the edge of the galaxy for 40 years. You called us monsters. You treated us like animals that needed to be caged. And now you call this situation difficult. Dexon lowered his head. You have every right to be angry. I am not angry, Daniel said. Anger is what you expected from us. Anger is why you were afraid of us. What I feel is something you probably do not understand. It is called disappointment. The chamber was silent. Daniel continued. We studied your civilization when we first made contact. We admired your technology, your art, your philosophy. We thought we had found friends among the stars. Instead, we found judges who condemned us for the same violence that exists in every species in this room. The Vethrani fought 3 civil wars before they achieved unity. The Therani conquered 12 systems before they learned diplomacy. The Milani exterminated an entire species that competed for their homeworld. He pointed at the assembled representatives. Every one of you has blood in your history. The difference is that you had time to forget. We did not. And instead of helping us grow, you locked us away and hoped we would disappear. The words hung in the air like a judgment. Nobody spoke. But we are not here to settle old grievances, Daniel said. We are here because something is killing your worlds, and you have finally realized that civilized species cannot stop it. You need predators. You need monsters. You need the humans you tried so hard to destroy. Dexon stepped forward. What do you want? Name your terms. The Council will agree to anything. Admiral Kevin Park spoke for the first time. We want the quarantine lifted immediately. We want full membership in the Council with equal voting rights. We want access to all galactic technology and resources. And we want command of the war. Gasps filled the chamber. Species that had never submitted to another's authority now faced the prospect of taking orders from the beings they had feared most. Command? A Therani representative sputtered. You expect us to follow human orders? Your fleet is tiny. Your technology is decades behind ours. Catherine Walsh smiled. It was not a friendly smile. Our technology is not behind yours. It is different from yours. Your weapons are designed for wars between civilized species. Clean, precise, limited. Our weapons are designed for survival against anything the universe can throw at us. We have been preparing for a fight like this since before you knew we existed. The debate lasted for hours. Some council members refused to accept human leadership. Others argued that pride had already cost them too much. Messages flew back and forth to homeworlds as governments debated the fate of their species. In the end, there was no real choice. The swarm was coming. The council fleets were gone. Only the humans offered any hope at all. The vote passed. The quarantine was lifted. Humanity was given command of the war. That night, Daniel stood in Lisa Monroe's office and looked out at the stars. The weight of what had just happened was still sinking in. Do you think we can win? Lisa asked. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. I do not know. The swarm adapts faster than anything we have ever seen. They learn from every attack and become immune to it. Our only advantage is that we are just as adaptable as they are. And if we lose, then we die fighting, like humans always have. But at least we will die on our own terms, not in a cage at the edge of the galaxy. The next morning, Daniel addressed the human fleet. 200 ships hung in formation around the Resolute, their crews watching on screens throughout the fleet. For 40 years, we have been told that we are too dangerous, Daniel said. too violent, too aggressive, too willing to fight. They were right. We are all of those things. But they forgot something important. He paused, letting the words build. Being dangerous is not the same as being evil. A doctor with a scalpel is dangerous. A parent protecting their child is dangerous. A firefighter running into a burning building is dangerous. Danger is just power, and power is defined by how you use it. His voice grew stronger. The galaxy called us monsters because we would not hide from our nature. They feared us because we embrace what we are. Now they need what we are. They need our aggression. They need our violence. They need our refusal to give up, even when the odds are impossible. We are going to show them what monsters can do when they choose to be heroes. The fleet erupted in cheers. Across 200 ships, thousands of humans felt something they had not felt in 40 years. Pride, purpose, the chance to prove that being dangerous could also mean being the ones who save everyone else. On the council station, Dexarn watched the human fleet prepare for war. He had spent his entire career warning the galaxy about the threat that humanity posed. He had written papers about their violent history. He had given speeches about the need to keep them contained. Now he watched them mobilize for a fight that might be unwinnable. And he felt something unexpected. Hope. A human officer approached him. It was Dr. Nathan Cole, the xenobiologist who had been working in council space for years. "You look troubled, Counselor," Nathan said. Bexarn clicked his mandibles. "I'm trying to understand. We treated your people terribly. We imprisoned you, insulted you, denied you the basic rights of civilized beings. Why would you help us now?" Nathan smiled. "Because that is what makes us human. We do not help people because they deserve it. We help them because they need it. That is the part of humanity you never understood. Yes, we can be violent. Yes, we can be aggressive. But we can also be compassionate beyond reason. We can forgive things that should never be forgiven. We can fight for people who would never fight for us." He looked out at the human fleet. "You were right to fear us, Counselor. But you feared the wrong thing. You should not have been afraid of what we might do to you. You should have been grateful for what we might do for you." Dexarn had no response. He simply watched as the human ships began to move, heading toward a battle that would decide the fate of every living thing in the galaxy. The war had begun. Called too dangerous, but when the Scourge came, aliens begged. Part 2. The Scourge Awakens commander Maria Santos had seen many terrible things in her 20 years of service. She had fought pirates in the asteroid belts. She had survived a reactor breach that killed half her crew. She had watched friends die in the cold silence of space. But nothing had prepared her for what she found in the Calori system. Her ship, the Swift Hunter, dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. The sensors immediately began screaming warnings. Maria silenced them with a quick command and stared at the main screen. The Calori homeworld was gone, not destroyed, not shattered into pieces, gone. Where a living planet should have been, there was only a massive cloud of organic matter floating in space. Billions of Calori had lived on that world. Now they were nothing but dust and debris, slowly spreading across the void. What could do this? Her pilot whispered. What could consume an entire planet? Maria did not answer. She was watching the sensors, tracking movement within the cloud. Something was still there. Something alive. The shapes emerged from the organic debris like nightmares given form. They were black, shifting, changing their bodies as they moved. Some were small, no bigger than a human fist. Others were larger than her ship. They had no fixed shape, no eyes, no mouths that she could see. But they moved with purpose, and that purpose was hunger. "Get us out of here," Maria ordered. "Maximum speed, now." The Swift Hunter turned and ran. Behind them, the shapes followed. They were fast, faster than anything Maria had ever seen. Her ship's engines were pushed to their limits, and still the things gained on them. "They are adapting," her engineer reported, his voice tight with fear. "They are matching our speed. In 3 minutes, they will catch us." Maria made a decision. She activated the ship's weapon systems and fired everything she had into the pursuing swarm. Missiles, energy beams, kinetic rounds. The weapons tore through the black shapes, destroying hundreds of them. For a moment, it seemed to work. The swarm fell back, damaged and disorganized. Then they changed. Maria watched in horror as the surviving shapes shifted their bodies. Their outer shells became thicker, reflective. The next volley of weapons fire bounced off them harmlessly. "They adapted," her weapons officer said. "In less than 30 seconds, they adapted to our weapons." The swift hunter barely escaped. Maria pushed her ship through a desperate series of jumps, losing the swarm in the chaos of hyperspace. When they finally emerged in safe territory, her crew was shaking and her ship was badly damaged. But she had something more valuable than an intact hull. She had information. The council chamber was filled with panic when Maria's report was presented. Species that had not spoken to each other in centuries now huddled together, united by fear. The recordings from the Kellery system played on the main screen, showing the swarm in terrible detail. Fleet Admiral Ibarra, the supreme commander of the Galactic Defense Force, stood before the council. She was Tharani, a species that resembled Earth's elephants but with 6 limbs and skin like polished stone. Her people were known as the greatest warriors in the galaxy. "We will destroy them," Ibarra declared. "I am mobilizing the combined fleet, 12,000 ships from 40 different species. We will meet this threat and end it." The council cheered. Here was strength. Here was power. Here was everything the civilized galaxy had built over 10,000 years of peace and cooperation. Dr. Nathan Cole watched the celebration from the observers' gallery. He was a human xenobiologist, one of the few allowed to work in council space due to his expertise in alien life forms. He had studied the recordings from the Swift Hunter more carefully than anyone else. He had seen what the council had missed. "They are making a mistake," he said to the Vethrani scientist beside him. "The swarm adapts too quickly. Energy weapons will be useless after the first engagement." The Vethrani scientist clicked his mandibles in dismissal. "Admiral Ibarra knows what she is doing. The combined fleet has never been defeated." 3 weeks later, the combined fleet met the swarm near the Vorn system. 12,000 ships against a cloud of black shapes that stretched across space like a living shadow. Admiral Ibarra gave the order to fire. The first volley was devastating. Billions of swarm creatures died in the initial assault. The council ships cheered and pressed forward, pouring fire into the enemy. Then the swarm adapted. Their bodies changed, becoming immune to energy weapons within minutes. They shifted again, learning to absorb kinetic impacts. They evolved in real time, studying each new weapon and developing counters before the next shot could be fired. The combined fleet had never faced an enemy that learned faster than they could fight. Nathan watched the battle from a secure research station 100 light-years away. He saw the fleet's weapons become useless one by one. He saw ships being swarmed and consumed. He saw Admiral Ibarra's flagship disappear into a cloud of black shapes. In 4 hours, the greatest military force in galactic history was destroyed. 8,000 ships were lost. Millions of crew members from dozens of species were dead. The swarm had barely slowed down. Councilor Dexon stood in the council chamber and faced the terrified representatives. His forearms hung limp at his sides. His compound eyes were dull with shock. "We have failed," he said. "Our weapons are useless. Our fleets are gone. The swarm is moving toward the core worlds. In 6 months, they will reach the capital. The chamber erupted in chaos. Species blamed each other. Old enemies used the crisis to settle scores. Some called for surrender, though nobody knew if the swarm could even understand the concept. Dexon waited until the noise died down. Then he spoke the words that many had been thinking, but none had been willing to say. There is one species we have not asked for help. One species whose weapons we have never seen. One species we banned because we feared what they might do to us. The chamber went silent. The humans, someone whispered. Dexar nodded slowly. 40 years ago, we called them too dangerous. We said their aggression made them unfit for civilized society. We locked them away because we were afraid. He looked around the chamber at the frightened faces of 100 different species. I was wrong, he said. We were all wrong. And now we must beg the monsters we created to save us from the monsters we cannot defeat. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in 40 years, the Galactic Council requested an audience with humanity. On the Resolute, Captain Daniel Shaw received the message. He read it twice, then looked at his crew. They want our help, he said. After everything they did to us, they want our help. His first officer, a woman named Jennifer Cross, shook her head. They can burn for all I care. Let them learn what it feels like to be abandoned. Daniel understood her anger. He felt it too, but he also felt something else. Something that made humans different from every other species in the galaxy. Set a course for the council station, he ordered. It is time to remind the galaxy why they were afraid of us in the first place. Called too dangerous. But when the Scourge came, aliens begged Part 1. The banned species. Great Hall of the Galactic Council was filled with representatives from 100 different worlds. They sat in their assigned seats, their strange bodies shaped by evolution on planets humans had never seen. Some had scales. Some had feathers. Some had no solid form at all. But they all shared one thing in common. They all feared humanity. Ambassador Lisa Monroe stood alone at the human delegation podium. It was a small podium, pushed to the far corner of the hall where nobody had to look at her unless they chose to. She had stood in this spot for 15 years, speaking words that nobody wanted to hear. Today was no different. Counselor Daxarn rose from his seat at the center of the great hall. He was Vithrani, a species that looked like a giant praying mantis with 4 arms and compound eyes that saw in every direction at once. His voice clicked and buzzed as he spoke, but the translation devices made his words clear to everyone. The human quarantine must continue, Daxarn said. Our observers have recorded their military exercises in the Outer Rim. They build weapons of mass destruction. They train their young to fight before they can even speak properly. They are a danger to all civilized life. Lisa wanted to argue. She wanted to explain that humans trained their children in self-defense, not war. She wanted to point out that every species in this room had weapons too. But she had learned long ago that the Council did not want explanations. They wanted confirmation of what they already believed. 40 years ago, humanity had made first contact with the galaxy. They had been so excited, so hopeful. They thought they were joining a community of enlightened beings who had moved beyond conflict. Instead, they found a galaxy that looked at human history and saw only blood. The wars. The genocides. The nuclear weapons. The way humans hunted other species to extinction on their own world. The Council studied human history for 3 years and then made their decision. Humanity was too dangerous to exist among civilized species. They were confined to the Outer Rim, banned from galactic travel, forbidden from trade or diplomacy. Lisa remembered the day of the vote. She had been a young diplomat then, full of hope that she could change minds. Now her hair was gray, and her hope was almost gone. The motion carries, the Council President announced. Human restrictions will continue for another standard cycle. Lisa nodded and gathered her documents. She would return to her small office on the station, write her report, and send it back to Earth. The same report she had written every year for 15 years. Nothing had changed. Nothing would ever change. Far from the council hall, Captain Daniel Shaw stood on the bridge of his ship, the Resolute. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and eyes that had seen too much combat. His crew moved around him with quiet efficiency, running their daily drills. The human fleet was small compared to the great armadas of the council species. They had only 200 ships spread across the quarantine zone like a thin wall against a galaxy that wished them gone. But those ships were tough, and their crews were tougher. "Message from Admiral Park, Captain," his communications officer said. "He wants to know if we detected the same signal." Daniel nodded slowly. They had detected it. A burst of data from somewhere beyond known space, filled with images and sounds that made no sense. Darkness moving. Worlds dying. Screams in languages that no translator could decode. "Tell the Admiral I want a meeting," Daniel said. "Something is coming. I can feel it." 3 days later, Daniel sat in a secure room with Admiral Kevin Park and 6 other senior officers. Kevin was older than Daniel, a small man with sharp eyes and a mind like a computer. He had led the human fleet for 20 years, keeping them alive in a galaxy that wanted them dead. "The signal came from the Calori system," Kevin said. "That is 3,000 light years from here, deep in council space. The Calori are a peaceful species. They have no enemies." "Had no enemies," Daniel corrected. "The signal stopped 2 days ago. Nothing has come from that system since." The room was silent. Everyone understood what that meant. "I contacted Ambassador Monroe," Kevin continued. "She tried to bring this to the Council's attention. They dismissed it. Councilor Thexon said it was probably a technical malfunction." Daniel felt anger rise in his chest. The Council would rather ignore a potential threat than admit they might need help from humans. Their pride would be the death of them. "What do we do?" asked General Catherine Walsh. She was the commander of human ground forces, a woman who had fought in 3 border conflicts and never lost. "If something is out there killing worlds, it will eventually reach us too." Kevin looked at each officer in turn. "We prepare, quietly. We increase our patrols and we watch. If the Council will not protect itself, that is their choice. But we will be ready." On Valanthos Prime, Lisa Monroe sat in her office and stared at a screen filled with reports. 3 more worlds had gone silent in the past week. The Denari colony on the edge of Council space. The Vorn research station near the galactic core. The Milani trade hub that processed goods from 50 different species. She had tried to warn them. She had presented data, analysis, projections. The Council had listened politely and then voted to table the discussion. There were more important matters to consider. Trade agreements. Border disputes. The eternal question of what to do about the dangerous humans in the Outer Rim. Her door chimed. Lisa was surprised. Nobody visited her office. She was the human ambassador, the representative of a species that civilized beings did not associate with. "Enter," she said. The door opened and Counselor Thexarn stepped inside. His compound eyes scanned the small room with obvious distaste. He had never spoken to Lisa directly in all her years on the station. He had only spoken about her, describing humanity as a plague that should have been exterminated rather than quarantined. "Ambassador Monroe," he said. His voice was stiff, as if the words caused him physical pain. "I find myself in an unusual position." Lisa kept her face neutral. "How can I help you, Counselor?" Thexarn was silent for a long moment. His forearms twitched in what Lisa recognized as a sign of extreme stress among his species. Finally, he spoke again. 14 worlds have gone silent. Our fleets have been sent to investigate. None have returned." He paused, and Lisa saw something in his compound eyes that she had never expected to see. Fear. "Something is coming, Ambassador. Something that our weapons cannot stop. Something that our ships cannot outrun." Lisa waited. "The Council has authorized me to make contact with your military leadership," Dexarn continued. "We require assistance. For 40 years, humanity had been called too dangerous to exist among civilized species. For 40 years, they had been treated as monsters, locked away in the dark corners of the galaxy. Now the galaxy had found something truly monstrous. And suddenly, the dangerous humans did not seem so frightening anymore." Lisa picked up her communicator and connected to the Resolute. "Captain Shaw," she said. "The Council wants to talk."